This week on World Traveler Cooking, we're going to make quiche Lorraine. This is a wonderful dish which can be a light meal or even a heavy meal if you eat enough of it, or it can just be an appetizer. From France, it's a sort of quiche, so it's a savory egg pie. And this is sort of one of the ones that's become kind of world famous. The ingredients are pretty simple. For the crust, I have 200 grams of flour with a quarter teaspoon of salt added, and to that I have 80 to 83 grams of butter. I'm using a 28 centimeter tart pan here. Obviously you might want to vary the dimensions of the pie crust for whatever sort of pie pan you're using. For the filling, we have 6 eggs. We have sour cream. Normally I think I'd use a smaller tart pan and maybe 4 eggs, but since I have a larger one, I guess I'm going to have to make more. I'm going to use around 270 maybe or so milliliters of sour cream and milk, and to that it's going to be around 270 grams or so of bacon. So normally I prefer to do 200, 200, 200, 4 eggs, but I'm actually thinking that'll be a little bit small on this tart form. So let's go ahead and get started. Now to make the pie crust, this is a standard short crust pie dough, so we take our butter, cube it, we can work it in with our hands or with a pastry cutter. I'm basically going to continue to work this together until I have something that's the consistency of sand, and then I'll come back and I'll start working in some ice water. Now, depending on how you like your pie crust, depends on how far you want to work in the butter. A lot of people like to work in the butter so that you just have some little flakes. For a crust like this, you can certainly do that. Or you can work it in homogeneously and get kind of a tighter, tougher, less flaky crust. It's up to you. But this has some nice little flakes in it. I think it'll be fine. Next, you can see that when I pick it up and squeeze it, I get these little balls that kind of then collapse. That means we're ready to add our water. So to add our water, we're just going to add a little bit. Work it in. You want the water to be pretty close to freezing, which in this case it is. And you're going to see that basically right away the dough starts to clump up. And we're going to just kind of slowly work in more water until we have a pliable pie crust. Should probably break the pie crust part off as a separate one. One thing to note is that while some people add sugar to pie crust, I almost never do. The reason is that sugar is actually a flavor enhancer. And one of the dangers is that if you add sugar to a pie crust, people are going to taste the pie crust more. So even with fruit, it doesn't matter if I'm doing something savory or sweet. I almost never add any sugar. And I might need just a hair more water. I started with 40 milliliters. That doesn't seem like it's quite enough. Yeah, this is starting to look like it may be. Yeah, this will probably work. So now I'm going to knead it, make sure that I have a nice pliable dough. I'll probably put a little more water in the freezer in case I need it. But this is looking like, well, this is looking like it may work with this amount of water. Might need actually I'm going to add just a tiny few drops more. There we go. Now this is definitely pliable. So once this is well kneaded and all the way incorporated and perfectly homogenized, then I will roll it out and put it on the tart form. And then I'll poke it with a knife or a fork But yeah, here we have this. This is looking just about perfect. Yep, here we go. The exact amount of water will differ from batch to batch. Flour makes a difference. The exact butter makes a difference. But you can see here we have our pliable dough. So that's our pie crust. Next, I'm going to roll it out. I'll put it in the form, and we'll be back. So I've measured out this parchment paper so that it's just the right length. And so I'm just going to take a rolling pin. And I'm going to roll it back and forth until I get something that is the entire width of this parchment and equally wide. So I'm just going to roll it out, and I'll be back when I'm done. So I've transferred it into this form with basically the parchment on top, and then you just peel the parchment off and you're left with this in the form. You're going to find places like here where the dough didn't quite cover, and so what we'll do is we'll just kind of pinch a little bit off elsewhere and cover it up like this. Remember that eventually most of this will be underneath and nobody's going to see it anyway, so mostly what we care about is having kind of a nice edge on the top here. So I'm just going to go around and mend this edge for a couple moments, and then we'll be ready for the next part. Yeah, here we are. So not a perfect pie crust in terms of the edges at all, but this is pretty darn good, and it'll work for both sweet and savory pies. Now obviously if I wanted to do a covered pie, I'd have to make roughly twice as much. But for say a quiche or an open pie, that's basically it. Then for a covered pie, you'd want to make sure that these overlapped a little more, and you could put the top on and pinch it closed. Alright, so for the bacon, I'm going to cut it into lardons. So I've kind of stacked it, and then I'm going to cut these into strips, like this. And if you're using slab bacon like I have here, remember, if the skin's tough, you'll want to remove it. This one has pretty manageable skin actually. So in that case, I'm going to just go ahead and slice it thin. And once I'm done with this, we'll start browning it. So first, pardon the light, but at any rate, I've started to preheat the oven to 180 at this point. And to brown the bacon, I started on a cold pan because this is kind of a rendering process. And I'm going to just heat this up and stir it until it browns a bit. You don't have to brown it all the way. We don't have to have super crisp bacon, but having kind of a nice, somewhat cooked limp bacon is sort of the way to go for this dish. So I'm going to keep cooking this, and I'll be back when we're ready to move on. So this bacon has now browned a bit. There's not a lot of oil on the bottom. This seems to be pretty lean bacon, which is fine. But if there was, I would probably set it aside and save it for other purposes. And so I'm going to take this off the heat, and we'll go on to the next step. So for the filling, I will combine approximately equal parts of milk and sour cream. And into this, I will add my eggs. Since these are farm fresh eggs, I am going to crack each one first and make sure it's okay, and replace it if it's not. I'll be back when all these are added, and we'll go from there. So, whisk these together. And while you're whisking it, you can add a bit of pepper and a bit of nutmeg. I like to do these fresh ground, but you can certainly just add like a pinch or so of store-bought ground nutmeg. There we go. Whisk in some more. And then we will whisk in the bacon. Smelling really good. The nutmeg especially. So adding your bacon like this. Again, as you can see, there's not much cooking fat left. If there was, I would definitely store it to the side. Trying to see if there's any worth saving. I don't really see it. So the bacon has the salt, so we don't need to do anything there. I'm just going to whisk again. Take the whisk out, and then this will get poured into the pie crust. So pouring this into the pie crust. And then this will go into the oven. We may need to spread the bacon out just a little bit. Then this will go into the oven, and we'll be back in 20 minutes or so. So here is our quiche Lorraine. Next up, a little bit of plating and a taste test. And normally with serving any sort of a pie like this, I usually start by cutting out a small piece. And I'll do the taste test with this, but this piece is not going to come out perfectly. And the reason it's not going to come out perfectly is because you're fighting against the geometry of the pie. So if you want to plate it, you definitely don't want to use that first piece. So I recommend taking a small piece out, and then you can cut another piece like off to the side like this, and this one you can serve normally. But for the taste test purpose, I'm just going to use the messed up little piece. I'm going to keep this around. I will let it cool down, and I'll eat over the next few days. And now for the taste test. So the first bite was mostly bacon, and so basically it tasted like sort of bacon and a cream sauce. It's really very nice. The egg custard has an almost cheesy flavor to it. Very, very, very pleasant. The nutmeg gives the same flavor profile as you'd get with like a bechamel sauce, but the sour cream makes it a little bit more cheesy. This is really, really very nice. Yeah, it reminds me very, very much of basically bacon and a cheese sauce. So if you find this content interesting, I hope I've earned a like and a subscription from you, and please check out my Patreon page, where you can get early access to up to between 3 and 6 months of early access to videos. On top of this, if you make this dish and you make it a little differently than I do, please let me know how in the comments. I love to hear these sorts of different experiences. At any rate, recipes in the description. Bon appetit, and see you next week.